Well, good evening. Tonight we're going to be talking a bit about fear and anxiety. And I know I talked about this a few months ago, but tonight I want to take a little bit of a different approach. And we're going to be talking about things in our life that we are afraid of, or maybe not afraid of, but something that gets us anxious and causes us to change how we live. And we're going to be talking specifically about where that stuff comes from. Where does it come from that causes us to change? Let's read the first 6 verses of Psalm 56. Here, David writes, "Be gracious to me, O God, for man tramples on me. All day long, an attacker oppresses me. My enemies trample on me all day long, for many attack me proudly. When I am afraid, I put my trust in you, in God, whose word I praise, in God I trust. I shall not be afraid. What can flesh do to me? All day long they injure my cause. All their thoughts are against me for evil. They stir up strife. They lurk. They watch my steps as they have waited for my life." All right, so David says, when I'm afraid, I put my trust in you. He says, I shall not be afraid. This psalm was written about when the Philistines seized David in Gath. Okay, so David, he's there in Gath and they get him. The Philistines, his enemies, they get him. Y'all remember that story? Let's read that story. 1 Samuel 21, 10 through 15. "And David rose and fled that day from Saul, and went to Achish, the king of Gath. And the servants of Achish said to him, Is not this David, the king of the land? Did they not sing to one another of him in dances? Saul has struck down his thousands, and David his 10,000s. David's very well known. They know who he is. Verse 12, "And David took these words to heart, and was much afraid of Achish, the king of Gath. So he changed his behavior before them, and pretended to be insane in their hands, and made marks on the doors of the gate, and let his spittle run down his beard. Then Achish said to his servants, Behold, you see the man is mad. Why then have you brought him to me? Do I lack madmen, that you have brought this fellow to behave as a madman in my presence? Shall this fellow come into my house?" Notice, in the psalm that David writes, he says, I shall not be afraid. I put my trust in you. And then in the story, it says, David took these words to heart and was much afraid. And then it says he changed his behavior before them and pretended to be insane. You know, it's easy to say, I trust in the Lord. It's easy to say, I will have no fear. It is easy to say, look, I know things are scary. I know things are bad. I know there's fear out there. There's all this stuff around me. But you know what? I have faith in God. I love God. I put so much into God. I trust him so much. I don't fear anything. Come what may. Whatever comes towards me, it's fine. I love God. I will fear nothing. It's easy to say that. But when it comes down to it, we have fear, don't we? And that fear can change our behavior. It can change the way we live. It can change what we do. But here's the thing. Sometimes that's a good thing. Sometimes it's not a good thing. David, when he does this, when he changes his behavior to act like a madman, does he have a reason to do that? David said, I put my trust in you. In God I trust. I shall not be afraid. But even though he said all that, he didn't just walk up to the Philistines like, yeah, I'm King David. What are you going to do about it? I'm King David. Y'all know me. Y'all know how powerful I am. You know everything I've done. What do you want to do about it? No, he didn't act like that. He pretended to be crazy. He changed his behavior. Was he being a hypocrite? No, because in this situation, this is what he should have done. There's a very real chance that the Philistines would have killed David if he hadn't done this. This is a prudent decision. This is a tactical decision. It's wise on the part of David because he knows what the outcome could be. Given the situation he was in, he had to change his behavior or he would have been in really, really big trouble. And his decision to act differently and to live differently, to change around how he normally would have done things, it really had no bearing on whether or not he trusted in the Lord. But there is the flip side to this as well. Because sometimes we can change our behavior. We can act different. We can live differently based on fear, and it's totally unfounded. There was no reason to do it. There's no basis for it. Anybody scared of spiders? I'm not talking about black widows. Not talking about the brown recluse. I'm not talking about poison spiders. I'm just talking about regular old spiders that you're going to find in the house. A wolf spider, right? The wolf spider is not poisonous. It cannot hurt you. They're actually good to have around because they're excellent hunters. They get rid of all the other pests. You ever jump when you see one? Do you ever scream out, oh no? You ever call your spouse to come and kill it because you're not getting anywhere near that thing? Do you act the same way if there's a fly in the house? How do you act when it's a spider versus how do you act when it's a fly? And why do you act one way for a spider that can't hurt you and a different way for a fly that can't hurt you? Both the fly and the spider, they pose no threat to you. They can't hurt you. Pragmatically speaking, the fly and the spider are on the same level, except some people, you don't put it on the same level at all. Some of you right now are saying, no, I got no problem with flies, but spiders, I don't do spiders. I don't do it. The fear is unfounded, but it's still there. It causes us to act different. Let's go ahead and pause this video and discuss with the people there some of your fears. What is it you're afraid of? Don't talk about why just yet. Don't think about why you're afraid of those things. We'll get into that. Right now, just talk about what you're afraid of. Go ahead and pause the video now and discuss that. All right, so we all have fears, and we may fear different things. Some of us have lots of fears, some of us have just a few fears, but we all have them. The question is why? Sometimes our fears are founded. There's a good reason we have those fears, and sometimes they are not. Sometimes we have a good reason to feel fear, to change our behavior in accordance with that fear. Other times we just don't. There's no good reason for it. So why do we fear the things we do? And why do we change our behavior because of those fears? The reason I'm even doing this lesson is because of something that happened just a couple days ago. I went out for a run. I decided to do 5 miles, and I decided to go over to the Blue Ridge Parkway and do my 5 miles on the Mountain to Sea Trail. And whenever I'm running, I like to have my headphones in, and sometimes I listen to music, sometimes I listen to podcasts. And so on Monday, when I did this, I was listening to a podcast with a woman named Courtney Dauwalter, and she is an ultra-marathon runner, pretty awesome at it. And she was talking about a lot of her experiences, the different things she's done during 100-mile runs and 240-mile runs and all these different things. And the first 30 minutes or so of this interview that I'm listening to, it was pretty good. But then all of a sudden the topic changes. And I'm just running along there on the trail, listening to all this stuff. And somehow what they were talking about ended up taking a turn. And they were talking about wildlife that trail runners encounter. And they started talking about different runners who got bit by a rattlesnake and died while they were running, who got mauled by a bear and died, who got mauled by a cougar and died. They were talking about in Britain, there was this hawk that was attacking people's heads, and just like its talons were scraping just huge marks in their head because they were attacking. All of these runners getting attacked out there. These runners are just minding their own business, running down the trail, and all of a sudden these wild animals come out and attack them and kill them, or just maim them and scar them, mess them up real good. And then they started talking about how it's difficult because you want to be able to keep your head up when you're running on a trail and look around, be on the lookout for all these animals. But when you're running a technical trail, a trail that's got roots and rocks and all that stuff, you got to look down and watch your footing. And so you can't always look up and see what's around you, what might be stalking you. For the first 3 miles of my run, I was having a nice little run. And then all of a sudden, I start seeing things moving around in the woods around me. I had to stop a couple times and do a double take because, what was that? Something was moving. Was that a bear? Do I need to react to that or not? For the first 3 miles, I was really enjoying the technical trail I was on. I like to change from the road that I usually run on. All those rocks and roots and crossing over the creeks and jumping over logs, all that stuff. It was really fun until I realized that it takes my focus off of looking around. What's around me? By the time I got off the trail and back to my car, I was just about convinced that there was a whole forest of deadly animals chasing me down, trying to kill me. Why? You know, the chances of being killed by a black bear are really, really, really low. Obviously, don't mess with the bears. Don't poke the bears, don't provoke them. Yes, they can be dangerous, but they don't usually attack. And from my research, the last time someone was actually killed by a black bear in the continental United States was 2014. And that was up in New Jersey. Cougars, they're dangerous, but it is really, really, really rare that they actually attack a human being and kill them. In fact, it's pretty rare to even see one around here. Why did I always all of a sudden have that fear? Why all of a sudden am I thinking about bears and cougars and all of these things coming out of the woods at me? Because that's what I'm listening to. I'm hearing stories. They're talking about something that happens while you're trail running, and here I am trail running. I'm in the situation, and I'm hearing about the worst case scenario. So suddenly I'm concerned about the worst case scenario. We all do this to some extent. And it may not be an outright fear, but it may be something that causes us to act different, to change how we live, to change what we would normally do, because we've heard something about something bad. We've heard that there is something to fear. We've heard that there's a problem. We've heard that something has gotten in our head, and now we have to act in accordance with that thing. But is that thing true? Is it worth being anxious about? Is it worth being fearful? Is it worth changing our lives? Let me ask you this. Have you heard of the murder hornet? Yeah, you probably heard about that. You probably heard about that. Murder hornets. They're these Asian hornets that are huge, and their sting really hurts, and they can wipe out an entire honeybee colony really fast, and we were terrified of them back in 2016. Wait a minute. 2016? No, that was 4 years ago. No, the murder hornet, that just came to America this year, right? 2020. Actually, no. See, you weren't scared of the murder hornet in 2016 because it never got reported that they were here in 2016. The news didn't talk about it. Therefore, there was nothing to be scared of. Let me just read the first paragraph here from sciencenews.org about this year's murder hornets. It says, 2 new specimens 2 new specimens of Asian giant hornet have turned up in the Pacific Northwest, suggesting that the invasive species made it through the winter despite efforts last year to stamp out the menace to North America's honeybees. Wait a minute. You mean there were efforts last year to deal with them? And this year we found one hornet, just one hornet. It was dead on the road in Washington. And then there was one more that was up in Canada. That's it. Why was it such big news just now? Why in 2020 did it suddenly become a thing? Furthermore, were they any less of a threat back when you didn't know about them? We're scared of what we hear. And even then, what we hear might not be the whole story. Added to this is the problem of experts. We love it when we can listen to experts on TV and they can tell us exactly what we need to know. But there's a couple of problems with that. Number one, the media incites fear. That's what they do for ratings. They stir the pot. They stir the pot, they exaggerate, they make things out to be way worse than they really are, and they can always find experts to play to that emotion. They can always find an expert to tell you why this particular thing is the end of the world. The second problem is, which experts do you listen to? Because the expert on one channel is saying something totally different than the expert on the other channel. And even then, the very same expert ends up saying 2 different things. And let's face it, let's be honest about this corona thing. How many times has Dr. Fauci changed his statements during this virus? Well, we've got new information now. So what I told you yesterday is no longer valid. This is the updated thing. Now this is what we're going with. That was inaccurate. We didn't know better yesterday. Now we know better today. Today is what's accurate. Until tomorrow. Until tomorrow when we have new information again. And I could go on and on and on about this, but here's what I'm getting at. Why do you fear? Why are you anxious? Why do you react to things the way that you do? Too often it's because the news told us to fear. It's because an expert said we should be anxious. It's because all the people on our Facebook told us that's how we should react. In John 14:27, peace I leave with you. My peace I give to you. Not as the world gives, do I give it to you. Let not your hearts be troubled, neither let them be afraid. The context of this is, it's Jesus speaking, and he's talking to his apostles. And he's explaining that he's going to be going away, but the Holy Spirit will come. All right, well, what happened after Jesus left and the apostles went on their own? You know, we don't have the full story of everything that happened to each one of them, but it's generally believed that all but one of them was martyred. John died in exile, and all the rest of them were executed. They were crucified, they were beheaded, they were thrown off of walls, they died violent deaths. And Jesus says, peace I leave with you. My peace I give to you. Not as the world gives do I give it to you. Let not your hearts be troubled, neither let them be afraid. As you go about your life this week, consider how you're living. Consider the things that you're doing. And consider why you're doing those things. Imagine yourself running on a trail, and the question is, are you enjoying it, or are you running from monsters? Because somebody told you there are monsters in the forest. Do you have the peace of Christ? Or are you pulling a David and acting insane because you're afraid they're going to kill you? I wanted to say a whole lot more than I have tonight, but I'm going to hold my tongue. I just encourage you to think critically about what's been said tonight. Ponder your own life. Ponder your own fears, your own actions, your own way of life in light of everything that this year has thrown at you, and reflect on these things. I hope all of you have a great week. I hope all of you stay safe, and hope you will join us again on Sunday for our worship service. We'll see you then. Bye.